from medical school with her clinical training focused on pediatrics. She now is working as a physician specialist with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health in the Outbreak Management Branch. So obviously, she's the first person we tapped when we needed some expertise here. Her work has been pivotal in the county's response to the global pandemic, and she's been working with multiple nursing facilities and other congregate facilities to manage and minimize COVID-19 outbreaks. So, Dr. Liu, thank you so much for joining us. We are so thankful to have your expertise here and your experience and just learn from you. And really, like I said, you're a great resource to the community. Help us to be your little foot soldiers in bringing information and safety and health to the rest of Palms and the rest of the LA area. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so sorry about that earlier technical difficulty. It seems that computers and I don't jive very well. So thank you for inviting me again as a physician specialist for the Outbreak Management Branch for the Department of Public Health. My day-to-day responsibilities is to, help the skilled nursing facilities and congregate facilities in LA County deal with this pandemic, minimizing transmission of COVID-19. So I just wanted to share some of my knowledge and share some information about the COVID-19 vaccines. So there's a couple of disclaimers that I wanted to just mention before we start with this presentation. COVID-19 and the information that we know about COVID-19 is rapidly changing. This presentation is current as of March 14, 21. It only includes information about the vaccines that are currently available in the US. I will be talking about the 3 available vaccines, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, as well as the Johnson & Johnson. Currently, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is on pause, and the status of that is changing continually. So I decided to just keep it in this presentation. So a brief outline of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to introduce the vaccines. We're going to talk about how the vaccines work, how they were developed, some of the safety data for the vaccines, how the vaccines are distributed, how you can get a vaccine, and then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about myths, scams, and how to get additional information about the vaccines through reliable sources. So what is it that we know about COVID-19? COVID-19 is caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-2. It can affect people in various different ways. Some people never get symptoms. Some people get mild or moderate symptoms, and others get severe illnesses. And a majority of these ones that get severe illnesses include older adults and people with certain medical conditions. You can still pass the virus to others, even though you don't have symptoms. One of the main ways we have to stop this pandemic is to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. As I had said previously, 3 vaccines for COVID-19 are available in the US. There's the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are what we call mRNA vaccines. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is what we call a DNA vector vaccine. The Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines are licensed for 18 and older, and the Pfizer vaccine is the only one available for older children aged 16 and up. Unfortunately, there currently is no vaccine available for any children 15 and under, though current studies are underway for both the Pfizer and Moderna ones. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are consist of 2 vaccines. Pfizer is 21 days apart. Moderna is 28 days apart. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a 1-dose vaccine, 1 dose, and you're done. All 3 vaccines are safe and effective. And again, currently the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is currently on a temporary pause because of a very, very, very rare side effect that affected 6 females that are younger adults. As you can see, it only affected 6, so it's actually a very, very, very rare side effect. So how do the COVID-19 vaccines work? The way vaccines work is that they prepare our immune system to recognize and fight off germs. All three of the COVID-19 vaccines teach our cells to make harmless spike proteins. The spike proteins are these little red projections on the COVID-19 surface that you can see on the top right-hand corner of this slide. What the spike protein does, it allows it to attach to our cells and subsequently use that as a mechanism to invade our cells and cause infection. When we are vaccinated, the spike proteins that we make with the vaccine um, gets presented on our cells. Once it's presented on our cells, our immune system recognizes as foreign. Once it recognizes it as foreign, it amounts an immune response by making antibodies, and it also prepares our immune cells to respond to future infections. So through the vaccine, our immune system recognizes a small portion of the COVID-19 virus. So once we do end up encountering COVID-19 through infection, our immune system recognizes it immediately and our system is mobilized. Um, as an end result, we don't become sick and your symptoms are much, 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 much milder. This is a very simple schematic on how the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines work. And again, the mRNA vaccines are the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Basically, the vaccines are injected, through the shot. Um, the mRNA is delivered into our cells, and our cells again make the spike protein of the virus. And the spike proteins are again put on the surface of our cells so that our immune system can learn that it's a foreign object and mount an immune response to it. The Johnson& Johnson viral vector vaccine is slightly different because it's what we call a DNA vaccine. It's actually delivered through a viral vector. The viral vector for the Johnson& Johnson vaccine is an adenovirus, which is a common cold virus. It's basically just used as a kind of Trojan horse to carry the DNA into our cells. Again, once that DNA is delivered to our cells, we subsequently make it into RNA, mRNA, and then the spike proteins are produced. And again, it's presented on the surface of our cells, and that's how our cells and our immune system recognizes it as foreign. So essentially the Johnson& Johnson vaccine, it has a slightly different mechanism of delivery to our cells compared to the Pfizer and Moderna, but the end result is that spike proteins are made, and that's how we recognize the COVID-19 virus if we were to get an infection. So some questions that I'm asked quite frequently is whether or not you can get COVID-19 from the vaccines. You absolutely cannot get COVID-19 from the vaccines. The reason being is that the vaccines available in the US at this time are not the complete COVID-19 viral particles. It's just a little part of their DNA or RNA that makes the spike protein. So again, you can't get it for COVID-19. Um, in summary, all three vaccines do not contain the virus that causes COVID-19, and it cannot give you COVID-19. So, the pandemic, we're into the pandemic a little bit more than a year now. It's amazing that we were able to develop a vaccine so quickly. So a very common question that's often asked is, well, how did we get this vaccine developed so quickly? Normally, developing a new vaccine takes years. However, we were able to use some of the information that we had when we had studied previous viruses, such as the coronaviruses, the first SARS infections. And we also studied both mRNA and viral vector vaccines for other vaccines, such as the Ebola vaccine. Um, Another reason why the vaccines were able to be developed so quickly was that the government funded and paid companies and scientists really to work around the clock and overtime because of the global pandemic and how it affected so many people around the world. This was a top priority. So lots of funding was going into it. And then again, researchers used existing networks to conduct the COVID-19 vaccine trials. However, even though the vaccine appeared to be developed very closely, no shortcuts were taken. The vaccines had to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 clinical trials. This is required of all medications and treatments that are available in the US before they can get an FDA approval. So as you can see, no shortcuts were taken. It's just that they were fast track because again, so many resources were available for it. And another thing that helped get the vaccines to the American population and worldwide population so quickly was that the pharmaceutical companies actually started manufacturing the vaccines while their clinical trials were still underway. This was a huge risk for the pharmaceutical companies because if their clinical trials subsequently showed that the vaccines weren't very effective, they would have manufactured all these vaccines, but would have to have disposed them. But luckily, the clinical trials showed that the vaccines were in fact effective. Another reason why manufacturing was so quick and speedy was because the mRNA vaccines are faster to produce than traditional vaccines. Again, it's because they're not using, eggs to produce, such as, the flu virus vaccine. And also the FDA and CDC prioritize the review of the COVID-19 vaccines. But again, I just want to stress that even though it was manufactured quickly and the clinical trials went very quickly and smoothly, were still being held to the same safety standards that all other vaccines were held to. So how do we ensure that the COVID-19 vaccines and the safety remain a top priority? So before the vaccines were authorized, the safety data were reviewed by independent medical and public health experts who subsequently made recommendations to the FDA and CDC. The FDA issued what we call an emergency use authorization, or EUA for short, so that the vaccine would be available for the American population much quicker. Again, this is only allowed in very rare situations where the expected benefits outweigh the potential risk. After authorization, the safety monitoring of the vaccines were continued to be done through the FDA and CDC. Rare side effects and other problems are continued to be monitored. There is actually a app that was developed just to monitor the COVID-19 vaccines and their safety. And this is what we call the VSafe, which is a text messaging app where you can indicate whether or not you're having any side effects or any other issues with the vaccines. Additionally, people are still being followed up in the studies with all three vaccines. The clinical trials are still continuing to be underway, looking at side effects as well as how their immune system is being maintained. There's also a registry for pregnant women that is involved uh, with these vaccines as well. So the three vaccines were studied in over 110,000 volunteers. During clinical trials for vaccines, half the participants would get a vaccine and half would get what we call a placebo, which is basically just salt water. And then the vaccines were tested in a diverse mix of people, including older adults, people with underlying health conditions, and communities of color. All three vaccines were found to be work very well, and they were equally safe for all. So how well do the vaccines work? That's a question that I always get. So it's hard to compare the three vaccines from one another. It's almost comparing oranges to apples. There's a couple of reasons for this. All the vaccines were tested during different times and in different locations. For example, the Pfizer vaccine was the first approved vaccine in the US, so they had done the studies much earlier. And then Johnson& and Johnson was the third approved vaccine, so the studies were obviously done a little bit more recently. There's different populations and it was done in different times. There was also different groups of people with different underlying illnesses. Regardless, what the data showed with all three vaccines was that they were 100% effective at preventing severe illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths. Now, what does that mean? That basically means that during the study and when they monitored the volunteers who received the vaccines, none of the participants died from COVID, none of them were hospitalized, and none of them had severe illnesses. And this is actually really, really amazing. So this slide is dedicated a little bit more to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it's the most recently approved vaccine. Again, for Johnson & Johnson, like the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, 4 weeks after getting the vaccine, everyone who got COVID-19 was protected from being hospitalized and no one died. The nice thing about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is that it's single dose, and you'd less likely have side effects. You're considered fully vaccinated 2 weeks after the single dose. Another thing that's really appealing about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is that it's easier to transport, store, and prepare. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccines require ultra freezing temperatures in order to store. And so the availability of these freezers are much, much more limited and are usually restricted to large universities and large hospital systems. Now, why is the COVID vaccine so important in helping us to really end this pandemic? What we know is that the COVID-19 vaccine is a safer way to build protection. Because the vaccines are very safe, you can get protection from COVID-19 with, mild side effects. However, if you were to, try to get protection from COVID-19 by getting infected with COVID-19, you're kind of, playing Russian roulette there where you can either become very sick or even die from it, or you can even pass it on to someone you love. Um, because both, the vaccine as well as COVID-19 infection are new, we currently do not know how long the protection from the vaccine will last compared to COVID-19 infection. The data from the vaccines is that the protection will last for several months at least, and the theory is that it could last several years. It's hard to say whether or not we would need a booster yearly, like the annual flu vaccine that's still currently under study. It is possible to get COVID-19 more than once, just like it's possible to get, a common cold or flu virus or other illnesses more than once. So, where can an individual get a vaccine? So, when the vaccine was initially rolled out in late 2020, because of the limitations on availability, um, LA County, as well as other states and other counties, rolled out a um, priority groups, and certain priority groups were able to receive the vaccine earlier on. Most recently, the Department of Public Health and the County of Los Angeles, um, on April 1st, everyone 50 and older was eligible for the vaccine. And currently, since April 15th, which is, less than 2 weeks prior, everyone aged 16 and older are eligible for the vaccine. Now, if you are 16 or 17, you can only receive the Pfizer vaccine because, again, the other two vaccines are only indicated for adults. The vaccine is free for everyone. It's actually paid by the government. Insurance is not required. Anyone can get the vaccine currently if you're 16 or up, regardless of immigration status or any other type of status. So where can an individual get a vaccine? There are over 600 vaccine sites throughout LA County, and there's several different appointment systems. There are large pods that are available that are run by, the Department of Public Health, LA City Fire Department, LA City. There are some vaccine clinics that are run by hospitals, some clinics, some pharmacies, some workplaces are making vaccines available. Long-term care facilities and senior housing developments and senior centers are also able to give vaccines to their residents. And then there's also mobile vaccination units. So how do you book a vaccine appointment? So I talk about booking a vaccine appointment fairly regularly, especially when I'm still seeing my clinic patients once a week in my clinic. The website is very easy to remember. It's vaccinatelacounty.com. You basically follow the instructions on how to make an appointment. I would say that the new develop currently, when I looked at vaccinatelacounty.com, is that they do have available at some sites just walk-in basis where you don't need to make an appointment. And that is something that's new because what we had realized was that some people and individuals were having trouble with the appointment portal, as well as having limited resources in terms of using the internet or whatnot. So there are some walk-in appointments available at some of the sites, but again, it's first come first serve. It's best if you can make an appointment, but again, if you have a relative or friend who was not able to make an appointment online, just check vaccinatelacounty.com, and they'll have information on how to go to one of the walk-up appointments. So what are the side effects of the COVID-19 vaccine? Common side effects include arm pain, redness, swelling, a little bit of fever, chills, muscle ache, feeling tired, some nausea, and some headache. The side effects are actually a sign that your immune system is building protection. Not everyone gets it. It just depends on how robust of an immune system you're mounting to it. You do not have to have side effects to show that the vaccine is being effective in you. It just depends on the individual. The side effects usually occur within the first 2 days, and it doesn't really last longer than a day or so. Um, when you do get the side effects, you'll feel better within a day or two. And if they are bothering you, just kind of slow down your day a little bit so that your immune system can kind of recoup. So when should you contact your doctor if you're having certain side effects? If your side effects seem to be lasting more than 2 days, or they start more than 2 days after receiving the vaccine, because again, it's unusual time period and we just want to make sure that you're not getting an illness from something else. Also, cough, shortness of breath, runny nose, sore throat, and loss of taste or smell are unusual side effects from the vaccine. So you should definitely be evaluated if you develop any of those symptoms. Additionally, you should contact your doctor if the symptoms get worse or you're just really worried about it. You cannot get COVID-19 from the vaccine. However, if you may have heard anecdotal stories about people who got the vaccine and still got COVID. There's some reasons for this. you could have been infected before you got the vaccine, but started showing symptoms afterwards. You could have also gotten infected after you got vaccinated because it does take some time for you to build up full immunity. Generally speaking, you are fully protected 2 weeks after the second dose of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines in the two-dose series, or 2 weeks after the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. Again, if you're having some unusual side effects, make sure you talk to your doctor and get tested because again, especially if you have symptoms consistent with COVID-19 infection. So why should you get vaccinated even though you've already had COVID-19? Um, we don't know how long you're protected after you've had a COVID-19 infection. You can also get COVID-19 more than once. Again, like we said, the vaccine protection is much safer and it strengthens your immunity. If you currently have COVID-19, you have to wait until your isolation period is over, mainly primarily to avoid spreading it to the people who are giving you the vaccine. And also, we just don't know how your body would respond if you were to get the vaccine while you are currently fighting a COVID-19 infection. You would have to wait 90 days if you had what we call a monoclonal antibody or convalescent plasma treatment for COVID-19. Again, because that can inhibit your immune system from responding optimally once you receive those vaccines. So will the COVID-19 vaccine cause you to test positive on a PCR or an antigen test? It will not. The reason being is that the vaccine is towards a part of the virus called the spike protein, but the testing for COVID-19 infections is to a different part of the virus. So that's why your test will not become positive. However, if you get what we call an antibody blood test to look for infection in the past for COVID-19, that may turn up positive once you receive the vaccine. Again, the reason being is that the vaccines mimic an immune response, so it can be picked up in the antibody blood test. I would say that most of the antibody blood tests available currently in hospitals and clinics and labs are unable to test for the COVID-19 vaccine protection. And the main reason is again, kind of like the PCR and antigen tests, the antibody tests for a part of the virus that is not being, that's not part of the vaccine shot. So what do you do if you're pregnant in regards to the COVID-19 vaccine? So we know a couple things. We know that pregnant women who get COVID-19 are more likely to get sick. They're also more likely to get pregnancy complications like preterm birth. Currently, there's limited information about the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines during pregnancy. However, all our current data presently shows that there's no harm during pregnancy. Pregnant women can receive any of the 3 vaccines if they're part of an eligible group. And currently the recommendation is for pregnant women to receive the vaccine. So what if you're breastfeeding and you wanted to receive the COVID-19 vaccine? Currently, again, there's limited data on the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines in women who are breastfeeding. However, based on what we know, it's not thought to be a risk to the mother or the baby, and women who are breastfeeding can still receive the vaccine. So how about people with weak immune systems? We do know that people with weak immune systems are at a higher risk of getting sick from COVID-19 infections. Because of that, they are highly recommended to receive the COVID-19 vaccines. Some of the studies did include some people with weak immune systems, such as cancer and stable HIV, and they actually did pretty well in the vaccine studies, and their side effects were not much different from the rest of the volunteers. Again, people with weak immune systems can receive any of the 3 vaccines. One question I often get is, what if you have a history of allergies and severe allergic reactions? So the COVID-19 vaccines do not contain eggs, gelatin, latex, or preservatives. There is a small risk of severe allergic reaction with any vaccine. However, the COVID-19 vaccines are not much higher than any other vaccine. There are a couple of allergic reactions which would prevent you from receiving the vaccine, and this is primarily an allergy to the polyethylene glycol or polysorbate. Polyethylene glycol is commonly what we know as Miralax. It helps with constipation. The reason being is that the vaccines do include those ingredients. So if you have an allergy to polyethylene glycol or polysorbate, you should not receive the vaccine. Now, people who are allergic to other things such as medications, foods, pets, or pollen, or who have a family history of allergies can receive the vaccine. So that's not an issue. Everyone who receives the vaccine is observed for at least 15 minutes after getting the COVID-19 vaccine. So what if you were receiving other vaccines? When should you receive your COVID-19 vaccine? The current recommendation is to not receive a COVID-19 vaccine within 2 weeks of receiving another vaccine. The main reason for this is so that side effects from either vaccine are not confused. So again, if you received another vaccine, wait 2 weeks before you receive the COVID-19 vaccine. If you received the COVID vaccine already and you want to get another vaccine, wait 2 weeks. Vaccine doses, as I had previously mentioned, the J&J vaccine, you only need 1 dose. For Pfizer and Moderna, you do need the 2 doses to get the maximal protection. It is important to know which one you received at this time. We do not recommend mixing and matching the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. The main reason is that we just don't know how well the protection works if you mix and match. So what happens if you're late for receiving the second dose of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine? If you're late, that's fine. You can get the second dose as soon as you can, and you do not need to repeat the series again. Again, as I had said, we're not sure at this time if a booster dose would be needed. I wouldn't personally be surprised though, because again, even with the seasonal flu vaccine, we do need boosters yearly. Um, Antibody testing is not recommended before or after getting the vaccine. Sometimes people want to know, oh, I want to see if the vaccine worked for me. So I'm going to check to see if I have antibodies first and then compare it afterwards. Like I said, previously, the antibody test in most labs, hospitals, and universities is just not able to detect for the antibody that we produce from the vaccine. So again, just a reminder, in order to be fully vaccinated for the vaccines, it has to be at least 2 weeks after the second dose in a 2-dose series, which is the Pfizer or Moderna, and then 2 weeks after a single dose vaccine, which is the Johnson & Johnson. If it's been less than 2 weeks since your shot, or if you still need your second dose, you are not fully protected. So until you are fully protected, you should keep taking all the prevention steps until you are fully vaccinated. So, again, like I had said previously, the vaccines are one way for us to kind of get back to how things were before the pandemic started. So a couple of the current recommendations from the CDC, if you are fully vaccinated, one of the nice things is that you can visit indoors with a small number of other fully vaccinated people without having to wear a mask or physically distancing. So that's actually quite nice, right? After being in the pandemic for a while and not hanging out indoors with anyone and wearing a mask and having to socially distance. Now, what happens if you are vaccinated, but you want to visit a family um, that is unvaccinated? So you can not wear a mask and you cannot socially distance if you're visiting those individuals. However, the ones that are unvaccinated still need to wear a mask. This is true unless, you're visiting people who have uh, severe illnesses that they're at risk for severe complications for COVID-19. So this is nice. And, most of the scenarios that fall into this category are, say, like a grandparent who wants to visit their children and their grandchildren. Obviously, the grandchildren are unvaccinated because our vaccines we cannot give vaccines to anyone 15 or younger. So, again, a vaccinated grandparent can visit an unvaccinated household without wearing masks or so physically distancing. So, even though you're vaccinated, we should continue to, do steps to prevent further spread of this pandemic, especially when you're in public. Again, wearing your mask and socially distancing in public, and you should still avoid medium or large size gatherings. Still continue to adhere to state travel advisories. And currently in the state of California, you are required to self quarantine if you do travel outside of California. If you are fully vaccinated, what should you do in regards to quarantine and isolation? So you should still watch out for symptoms of COVID-19 if you've been vaccinated, especially if you've been around someone who is sick. If you are fully vaccinated and you are exposed to someone who has COVID-19, you don't need to get tested or be quarantined unless you have symptoms, unless you live in a group setting like a detention center or group home, or if you've traveled out of state. However, you do need to monitor your health for symptoms of COVID-19 for 14 days and continue to protect yourselves and others. If you are fully vaccinated and have symptoms of COVID-19, you should get tested and you should stay home from others. So we're still really learning about the vaccines, and again, the COVID-19 infection is very new. So we are, continuing to monitor how the vaccines may help people from spreading COVID-19. We're still trying to learn about how long the vaccines will protect us for. And again, until we know all those answers, we should continue to do the basic preventive measures that we've been doing all along, including the social distancing and mask wearing and hand hygiene. So there's a couple of myths that's floating around regarding the COVID-19 vaccines. And I think that I touched upon a lot of these myths, including it was developed too fast. Like we talked about, it was not developed too fast. What happened is that we applied our previous knowledge that we had to develop the COVID-19 vaccines. A common myth is that the vaccine can give you COVID-19. Again, as we said, the vaccine is only to one part of the COVID-19 virus, so it's impossible to get an infection from it. That the vaccines can affect our genes. Because the vaccine and the DNA and mRNA that's included in the vaccine is only used to make the spike protein so that our immune cells can recognize it. It does not incorporate into our genes. So there's no way you can pass on any of this DNA or mRNA. Um, let's see. And that another common myth again is that you don't need the vaccine if you've already had COVID-19. Again, with the immunity from vaccine, appears to be longer lasting than with COVID-19 infection. If you have any questions about some of the myths that are floating around regarding the COVID-19 vaccines, you can log on to the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health or CDC website. They do address a lot of these myths. So again, those are good, reliable sources to get information. Unfortunately, when we are in a state of emergency, there are always people out there that are trying to profit from the pandemic. There are vaccine scams, unfortunately. Um, Again, the vaccine is free. You don't have to pay anything for it. So if you get called about a low cost deal or put you on a special waiting list or sell you a vaccine or a miracle cure, it's a scam. You can report any COVID-19 scams to the LA County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. And again, just, you know, protect your personal information, whether or not you receive calls, texts, or emails. Just be careful of who you're sharing information from. Um, we are really encouraging people to try to get information about COVID-19 vaccines from reliable sources. Again, the vaccinatelacounty.com website is managed by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. There's also a Spanish version of the website as well. The CDC, which is the Centers of Disease Control, also has a website available so that you can get reliable information. In summary, we have 3 excellent vaccines that are safe and effective. And again, I just want to remind everyone that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the status is changing on a daily basis, but currently it's on pause. But the recommendation is to continue to use it. If you do get exposed to COVID-19, all 3 vaccines can prevent you from getting sick, missing work, or ending up in the hospital. And the most important question that I get asked all the time is, which vaccine should you get? My philosophy is that all the vaccines work very well, and basically just get the one that's available to you first, because the faster you get the vaccine, the faster you are protected. Again, an end message that I'd like to say is that vaccines protect us, our families, our coworkers, and our communities. So that's the end of my slideshow. Thank you so much for listening. And I think we had some questions that were submitted.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to thank you so much for providing such comprehensive information. I feel like I learned a ton during that presentation. You answered questions that I had and questions I didn't even know I had. So I just really want to thank you for providing such wonderful information.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I want to, you addressed many of the questions that were shared in our survey, for instance, about the booster shot and things like that. But there was one question I wanted to ask around, let's see. And you may have spoken to this already, but just to kind of make sure that the question is fully answered for the person who asked it. After getting vaccinated, how long does immunity last?
So we currently still trying to find that information. The most recent studies on the participants who were in the clinical trials indicate that the immunity lasts for at least several months at this point. And again, the theory is that they will last several years. We may or may not need a booster. And mainly the booster is because, like any other virus, they're very kind of sneaky and they always mutate and change as so to avoid, the vaccine protection. And that's the main reason why we need booster shots.
Thank you. Yes, so just like for many other things, it sounds like that there's some things that we don't know yet that we still have to kind of get some more research on or kind of wait some more time to find out.
Yes.
Thank you. One person had a question around data and companies. And so the question is there a way to get information regarding the number of people who have tested positive for COVID-19 at companies who welcome patrons and how the company handled that?
So there is, if there is an outbreak at a company or like a restaurant or a work site or even a school or skilled nursing facility, they are required to post notification at the entrance of their establishment, as well as indicate the date as to when the last infection was there, and where you could, if you were like say present within the 14-day period, whether or not you'd be at risk for that. And that is something that establishments are required to do. But
thank you for that
yeah.
information. That's perfect.
Mhm.
That kind of reminds me. I think that many folks may have seen like lots of different like sometimes they're like 8.5 by 11 sheets or information that's posted at the very front of a store, or usually in the window or at the door or at the entrance. And so it sounds like you're saying that that information would also share about the COVID-19 if there had been any outbreaks at that particular location or establishment or business.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, so it sounds like we should continue to pay attention to that information. It's not just about mask wearing, that's really important. Not just about distancing, that's also really important. But some of the signage you might see before walking into a business might share about any potential outbreaks that have happened at that particular facility and how it was handled.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. I just learned another thing there. That was really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to open it up. Those are you answered many of the questions that were submitted on our survey. So I'd like to open it up to the folks who are in the space. If folks wouldn't mind, if you have any questions at this time, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Dr. Liu.
Hi.
Hey, Tina.
Hi, Randall. May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Liu, so this concept of us maybe needing a booster, I thought it was because, we weren't at herd immunity and the virus is still out there, but you were mentioning it's because it's subject to mutate easily. Therefore, a booster would be needed. Is it that and not the herd immunity thing?
It's both. With the immunity, we're not sure how long the immunity will last from the initial vaccines. But the other, I guess the other flip side of it as well is that, viruses continue to mutate. And in the press, I'm sure you have read about the different variants. There's a UK variant, there's a Brazil variant, there's a Israeli variant, there's a California variant. So what happens is because the virus replicates quite quickly once it causes infection, it does cause some mistakes, and the mistakes that make it more advantageous or make it, better to infect, those ones seem to last. And so, so the booster, if we do have a booster, it may be to the variant. So for example, Moderna is currently looking at doing a booster for some of the variants. But for the vaccines that are currently available at this point, they have pretty good protection towards the known variants.
Excellent question. One other question that came up was around mask wearing. Some folks have seen guidance that indicates that wearing double masks or two masks is more effective than wearing one. Could you share with us any research or kind of the thought behind that?
Yeah, so the current recommendation is to have double mask, mainly just to decrease the spread of, COVID-19 particles from, two individuals or groups of individuals when they're in close contact. The studies have, there's been a smattering of different studies as to which masks are more effective. Should you wear a cloth mask, a bandana, a gaiter, a paper kind of surgical looking mask? And the recommendation really is that, the mask that you choose should have at least 3 layers to it. So, a lot of the fabric masks that are available in the stores or you can buy from Etsy, the ones you want are the ones with 3 layers. And then again, you want a double mask on that. So things like gaiters and bandanas, unfortunately, offer the least amount of protection because oftentimes they're single layered.
That's excellent information and giving much more perspective on that than I had previously known. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other folks have any questions that have not been answered at this time? I invite folks to just unmute themselves.
Dr. Liu.
Hi, Joshua.
Hey, one of the things I noticed in the survey and even, in the general anecdotal pool of talking to people was there's this concern about data being shared or could you just talk really quickly about how sound the data is behind the vaccinations and behind the processes that go through just from a a process level, how much we can actually trust this data so that we have a few talking points when we go out into the world and talk to maybe some of our more skeptically minded friends.
So the data is individually verified, through the FDA and individual experts that review the data, to make sure that the data are not inconsistent and things of that nature. So there's huge committees and huge panel and experts that are reviewing the data. So we do know that they're reliable and they're also not inconsistent. Again, with the vaccines and their approval, all that data is actually public information. The data is published, as well as when the FDA was reviewing these vaccines, those committee meetings, some of the committee meetings, especially the ones that allowed for final approval for emergency use of the vaccines, were broadcast publicly. So, there was a lot of transparency in the discussion of the vaccines as well as the data available.
And how does this vaccine compare to other vaccines that we feel are commonplace, like polio or flu?
So that would be a really hard question to answer because again, it's like not even comparing oranges to apples anymore. It's comparing oranges to watermelon at this time. But one of the thing that really impresses me with this vaccine is that during the clinical trials, no one died from COVID. No one had severe illness from COVID, and no one was hospitalized from COVID. And again, the studies were done in more than 100,000 individuals. And I think that is really, really impressive. I cannot think of another vaccine off the top of my head that had data like that. And it's very, very impressive.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, if there are no other questions that folks have, I was just going to give one more opportunity for anyone to raise any questions they may not have raised already.
I don't want to hog the space, so I wanted to make sure no one else had a question.
Yeah, Tina, go ahead.
Okay. I don't think you addressed this, but what about flying, Dr. Liu? I know the CDC no longer requires one to quarantine 2 weeks after you fly to a destination. They've lifted that recommendation, but what are your thoughts? Because I would want to visit my parents in Ohio. I'm just, going through the airport, thousands of people are going through it, and I'm still a little irked about being in cramped quarters in an airplane, although I hear that the air circulation is very good in airplanes now. But, my father has cardiomyopathy, he takes blood thinners. It's just that, one in a whatever chance that I may have caught something going through the airport. So I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
So there's a couple of things that, again, I just wanted to bring up. So you are correct in terms of the filtration in the airplanes. The filtration is incredibly good in an airplane. The filters that they have are very, very tightly woven, so tightly that even the virus cannot go through it. So once, the air circulates, it gets caught in the filter, it stays there and it doesn't go away. The other nice thing about travel currently is that you do still need to wear a mask when you're on a plane. So that's an additional level of protection. If you are fully vaccinated, again, it's likely that you will, if you were to get a COVID infection, your immune system would take care of it so quickly that you would not even have enough virus particles to pass on to other people. So that's an important thing that helps when you're fully vaccinated.
That was a lot of knowledge there for me too. Learned a lot there about the filtering in airplanes. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes, that was fascinating. One last question that I want to raise is we know that there are many impacts of COVID-19, mainly on the body, of course, if one contracts it, but also, just via being in the pandemic for over a year at this point, and just the amount of loss and grief and just stress in different ways, and the impact, the varying impacts of COVID-19 that are not equitable across communities, right? folks are feeling like, they have like, or folks are, kind of thinking about stress or PTSD or mental health, are there resources that we have that are either low cost or free to be able to take care of our mental health?
That I am not familiar with. I apologize. I'm not familiar with any of the resources for mental health.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Definitely know what you're speaking out of your area of expertise. I know that LA County had allowed everyone in the county was given access to Headspace.
Yes.
Yes, and so that is still a resource that folks can continue to use. And definitely, if the Palms NC becomes aware of any other resources, we'll definitely share them out in our community.
Yes, yeah. And I would say that I had heard about Headspace. I don't have personal experience with it, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, so we encourage folks, for folks who, someone who may have asked that question, or folks may be thinking about just how to take care of one's mental health, even while we're still in the pandemic, let alone when we make our way out of it. Definitely, it's important to engage in that self-care. That self-care is really important towards your overall health. And so you can check out Headspace, and you can also contact the Palms NC if you have questions about that. All right, with that, we want to give a huge thank you so much to Dr. Liu and to Josh Noble for co-planning this event with the Palms NC Committee for Racial and Social Justice. We think it's really important for us all to be informed as a way to move forward out of this pandemic together as a community. So I just want to thank everyone for their participation. Thank you for your questions. Thanks to everyone for just their involvement and your patience as well. And thank you, Dr. Liu, for spending this time with the Palms community and helping us become more informed as we continue to battle this pandemic.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And again, if anyone has any questions, just look on the LA County Department of Public Health website or the CDC websites.
Wonderful. And we will share our recording. I will share this recording within our community so that folks who couldn't make it tonight also get access to the wonderful information.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.